I want to take a moment to thank all of you. It is quite amazing. But one thing is that Africa, I am in because we rely on one individual, France. And that France is the architect that manipulates, install dictator across Africa. And that the interests of Africa are always ignored. And that is why we find ourselves in the midst of this destruction that we find. But however, I am here to reignite, to re-energize Africa, that we must rise together and tell France enough is enough. We can govern ourselves. We don't need to rely on France. We don't need to depend on France. We need to stand together. We know how they became what they are. And we know how we can take the pattern. And we know how we can change the dynamic. But we can't do anything because we are superimposed upon us by France dictator. France decide who has to govern us. But I am here to remind us that we can govern ourselves if we do the right thing. We do the right thing. After many of us have studied in this amazing world here in the United States, all of you in Europe, we can change the culture of dynamic. But unfortunately, France is glued upon Africa that we don't even have a voice to even speak up. And that is why. But however, let's look. Many of you haven't heard what is going on. Many of you have seen this flight, if you can see it. That is a French military plane. That is a French military plane. In Mali. You know, if we can have a government, so when the people have a government that represents them, so what happened? France create another form of group in order to instigate, because that government opposed the French policy. And that is why the France go indirectly, instead of working for an amicable, effective government, France goes in to instigate. Let's look at what is going on here. In Mali, in Mali, this is a French military jet delivering military equipment to finance, because Mali is signing with the West Africa to create a West African monetary policy. Okay, let's look. I know in one of my several videos I spoke that Africa is delivering 500 billion a yearly. Africa deliver 14 African continents deliver 500 billion to the French treasury, Caisse communautaire française. 500 billions. While Africans are suffering. If Caisse communautaire is delivering 500 billion to the French treasury, whereas Africans are suffering, then you can see why when the Malian joined the West African currency that will begin in operation next year, probably we are in December, the West African currency operation which Mali signed to join, guess what is happening? France indirectly sending military equipment to sponsor the jihad in Mali, because they want to overthrow, simply because they are joining the West African currency operation. Because France is seeing the 500 billion they get yearly from West Africa as a threat to them. And that is why they indirectly send their military plane to supply military to overthrow the government in Mali. And then you can understand why France is glued onto Africa and destruction of African value. And Africa cannot grow. Africa will remain miserable. That is a French jet. You will going to see more details of this Let's look. French jet delivery machines and sponsor to fight against the government in Mali. Let's look. That's people that are being trained by the French government against the Malian government that is fighting to the new currency that will be going operational in West Africa. Do you understand the value of a currency? Because we don't depend a value of a currency that the government has a central bank to decide the fundamental value and the exchange mechanism for the interest of the indigenous development. Imagine that France has its own currency, the European currency. Does Africa decide the value of the European currency? Obviously, you will agree with me that Africa doesn't. That is the Malian government signed with the West Africa for a new single currency that will go operational. But instead, France now formed his own sponsored jihadists in West Africa by providing financial assistance to carry on the training using their military jet to oppose the current government of Mali. Can you imagine why Africa remained destructive because of the France influence in Africa? Let's look. This is the training that is provided by France government. Let's look. That's the military. That's the bike that's delivered by the French Ministry of Defense. French Ministry of Defense. It's not just defense only, but the France Ministry of Defense delivering this equipment instead of supporting amicable advancement in African development. You all know what happened in North Africa. Recently, about less than 24 hours, migrants from Africa, at least 50 of them perished. 50 of them perished in order to escape to Spain, moving because of lack of economic opportunity. They are just perished. But when African leaders decided to create their own currency rather than rely on France foreign this, and yet France is sponsoring jihad. Who is the number one terrorist across the globe? It's France. France is the architect of terrorism in Africa. But yet, the world just turned a blind eye because it's a superpower. It's a veto power in the United Nations. I can decide whatever can happen in elsewhere. And that is why when there is a meaningful development, they can't allow it to function in Africa because France is the architect and the veto power that can decide what happened in Africa and elsewhere around the world. You all know what happened. You all know what happened in Ivory Coast. France persuaded the United Nations to create a resolution so they can start bombarding Ivory Coast because Africa wanted to create a reform in the system that will benefit the interests of Africa, of Ivorians. But yet, France instituted the United Nations to pass a vote because it's a permanent member at the United Nations Security Council. And that is why Africa does not have a voice at the United Nations Security Council. African continent as a whole, not African nation, but African continent as a whole, doesn't have any representative at the United Nations that has a veto power. Because France has 14 African nations. And so therefore, he has the power of a veto on behalf of Africa to decide the future of Africa. But I am here to tell Africa, this is the time we have to rise. We have to rise and say no to France. We have to terminate the relationship of France. I began to do the right thing for African development, for the interest of all Africans, not for the interest of French citizens. Not for the interest of French citizens. Let's look. come back to this video. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? Can you imagine that France is the architect and sponsor terrorism in Africa? That is amazing that France is responsible for providing terrorism in Africa. Let's look, we would like our France to become as a business partner of Africa, promote economic development, rather than instituting terrorism. Let's look at the Southern Cameroon case. The Southern Cameroon case, Southern Cameroon is never a conquered territory. Southern Cameroon in West Africa. Southern Cameroon is a sovereign nation. La Republique got their independence that were prepared by France after the Allied forces, when the United Nations was formed. He said all the nations that were under the colonial administrator be prepared for immediate independence. So France, La Republique du Cameroon, is a colony of France. And therefore, France prepared La Republique to immediate independence in 1960, January 1960, when France established La Republique and the United Nations as a sovereign nation. In doing so, Southern Cameroon territory wasn't part of La Republique du Cameroon. Get me right. Southern Cameroon wasn't part of La Republique. So therefore, United Nations accepted and acknowledged the sovereignty of La Republique du Cameroon. So in 1961, under the British administrative authority, Southern Cameroon was prepared for their own independence in 1961. In doing so, La Republique wasn't part of Southern Cameroon. Get this right. And therefore, the fact that the British administrator, on the false illusion that Southern Cameroon should join Nigeria, that was the British administrator. But because the leaders of the Southern Cameroon unanimously denied the relationship of joining Nigeria, and that became a complex issue with Britain. They did not want to see the Southern Cameroon maintain its identity. And that is why they choose two options rather than the third option. The two options was, do you opt for an independent by joining the Republic of Cameroon under equal status, or do you opt for an independent to join Nigeria under the same equal status, irrespective of the population differences? But they were to come together of equal status. And that is the reason, that was the purpose. And so if the Southern Cameroon joined La Republique of equal status, that doesn't make La Republique a master of Southern Cameroon. Get this right. That did not make La Republique a master of Southern Cameroon. So the people of Southern Cameroon have the right and privilege to decide whether they can live with La Republique or they shouldn't live with La Republique, and shouldn't be any problem that La Republique will have the audacity and murdering citizens of Southern Cameroon. Because France is more interested in the mineral deposit in Southern Cameroon that will uproot and feed the French citizens, while our citizens are being murdered indiscriminately. But I am here to remind France that our people will never live under the umbrella of La Republique du Cameroon. We also remind the world that injustice that have been perpetrated around the world is absolutely devastating, not only to the citizens of Southern Cameroon, and also Africa as a general. Also Africa as a general. Why must the Southern Cameroon live under the umbrella of a foreign nation? Of course, you would agree with me that Sub-Saharan should not live under an umbrella. If we came together of equal status, if we came together under equal status, why should the Republic define our status? If we came under equal status, why should the Republic define our status? Why should the Republic? The Republic has no mandate, no power, no jurisdiction to define the status of the Southern Cameroon if they come together under equal umbrella, under equal status. So that is here I am reminding the world community. Our people has the right and privilege. Our citizens are being sentenced each day, each night by a terrorist government of the Republic that is sponsored by France. You see from here, that is France sponsoring jihad in West Africa by sending equipment to fight against the central government simply because they opted to join a single currency that will benefit the citizens of Africa. If 50 citizens of Africa are being killed trying to travel to Spain, why can't Africa do the same thing to keep its citizens here in Africa, that they don't need to migrate to Spain, that they will be killed in a high sea? Fellow Africa, we have been suffering for the past 100 years, but this is the time we have to rise and tell France to stay and concentrate on France and allow Africa to be whatever they choose to be. We cannot stay in this slavery. Please. We cannot stay in this slavery. We cannot. Just imagine, I don't know whether if one of my relatives happened to have died in that boat, that vessel that comes out in south of Spain. I don't know. It may be you watching, your relative is in that vessel that capsized in south of Spain. You don't know as you are watching. It may be your relative. It may be our relatives that capsized in that vessel in Spain. They are trying to escape looking for greener pasture. But unfortunately, we have a nation, France, that instead of concentrating on promoting economic prosperity, they concentrated in exploitation. And then when the nation began to make a reform, just like Mali, to join the single currency that will go operational, then they can decide the development of Mali. France is sending military equipment to destabilize that peace coexistence. France is sending military equipment to destabilize the peaceful coexistence. But I am here to remind France that Africa has risen. That we will no longer live under the dark ages, that France can concentrate. But this is the moment that France must rise. Africa must rise and say no to France. Let's let go of France. If you think France cannot, we should have the moment to say, we let go of France and we can start to rebuild Africa for the future prosperity. Imagine, if France is sending this to overthrow, why can France not assist the new monetary policy that they can have a better transition? Why should France not educate them how they can have a better transition to institute their own currency and work in collaboration with a new system so that will benefit African development? Imagine you can't travel the whole road development because they depend on France to loan their currency. Let's take for example, the Central Bank of Africa will provide restructural development for the interest of Africa. Let's take for example in the United States. A few years ago when President Obama became to power, when he took over office, the banking system was in total collapse. The financial aspect of the United States was about to in shambles. Businesses, homes were in collapsing. But what Obama did, he asked the central bank for a new loan to finance banking system. They did not ask the World Bank, the IMF. They asked the Bank of the United States. They asked the Bank of the United States for loan to provide to financial institutions in the United States. They did not ask the IMF. So why should Africa ask the IMF what amount of money should be instituted in Africa? Why should? Because they are the control mechanism. The IMF are tools of Europe and France to control Africa, and that Africa must need a guarantee from them to decide how they should work. No! United States did not ask IMF for a loan. United States asked the Central Bank of the United States to finance the bank to increase liquidity. In circulation. United States did not ask the Central Bank, the World Bank, the IMF. Today the economy is back in stability. Why must Africa ask the World Bank? No, Africa should have their own bank, their own currency, where they can borrow and finance infrastructural development that rely on a foreign France manufactured financial institution called World Bank. Let's take, for example, if France needs cocoa, they don't have cocoa. They will need to export from Africa. Then they will have to accept the currency of Africa so that the cocoa can easily be delivered. There will be economic mechanism to decide the future of exchange mechanism. If France is desperate need, they will obviously accept the currency of Africa. So that is how Africa needs to work its way and redefine itself to the structure of the world community. Let Africa get away from this, rely on France. China has come out of this economic bloc that is manipulated and controlled by Europe. China has moved out of it. The Eastern Asian bloc has moved out of this destruction system. And they began to reform their own system. Give me a minute. Give me a minute. Fellow Africans, look, China has moved out of this. We know how China did. We know how Asian bloc did. But we cannot move forward. Why should we be paying $203 billion to the European Union? We are paying $500 billion to France Union, to Caisse Communautaire Française. $500 billion. Why should we? Why Africans are being capsized in Spain? Because of lack of poor economic development, infrastructure. Why we are just roaming around? No, we can do this. Let's create the Bank of Africa. If we need financial assistance, run infrastructural development. Let the bank finance the infrastructural development. If there is less money in circulation, they increase liquidity ratio using all the tools of economic mechanism. We can do this, Africa. How much do we have to rely on foreign funds to decide the future of Africa? This is a terrible thing that I have ever witnessed in my life. Let's go back to Southern Cameroon. Southern Cameroon is where I was born. I was born in Southern Cameroon. When I grew up, life was miserable. Life was miserable because there was no structural foundation that defined the value. But we are being placed under the surveillance of a foreign nation called La Republic of Cameroon, that they control every aspect of our life. When I read what I studied from school and I compare the system, there is a gap of discrepancy. And this gap of discrepancy, it leads me to become miserable. And my fellow brothers and sisters that are also miserable because of this gap of discrepancy. That they rely on a foreign nation, France, to decide the future of Africa. But I am here, I have a good news for Africa, that we must rise and say no to colonialism. No to France domination. No, we are capable to do the best for Africa, and we can change the course of this dynamic. Let's take, for example, those nations that signed to withdraw from the French colonial currency. They are invited to France by the colonial masters. Do you know that Idris Deby, the Chadian president, he was called to an environment, to an area. The Chadian president was called to an area. When he came, he found that the children were being gathered to pick up in a plane. The children were being gathered to take in a plane. He didn't know the destination where the children were be going. That was the Chadian president 1 month ago. The children were gathered in a stock environment. And he was very disappointed. I am sure tears came out of his eyes. And he saw that there were Africans being gathered like animals to be sold. They'll be sold for commercial purpose. We don't know. I didn't find further where this commercial plane came from. But they were of European descent, which means they are from Europe somewhere. They were neither Asian nor Arab. And obviously you will agree with me that they are from Europe, somewhere in Europe. This is an African that the Chadian president found them in a miserable condition, and they were to onboard a plane. Where were they going to is unknown to you and I. Maybe for organs harvesting, maybe for other commercial purposes. Why we know this distance? And he called the jet to be stranded. Likewise in Libya. In Libya, Africans are being sold as slaves. Do you believe that Africa are less silent about slaves being sold in Libya? Libya is a commercial center for slavery. We thought about slavery here in the United States. That was 4 years ago. But now another event of slavery just reignited in Libya, where it became the commercial market for slavery. And yet we have leaders of various nations in Africa. We have leaders, we have presidents. They can't even talk about it. They can't even voice their concern. Of course, China president just sent the military to Libya border. But what are the other African head of state saying about it? Of course, they remain silent. They remain silent as though nothing is happening. But I am here to remind Africa that we need to rise. This is the moment that we need to rise and say no to colonialism, no to enslavement, and no, we can do the right thing for the common good of all Africans. Fellow brothers and sisters, Southern Cameroon, this is where I was born. And I believe that I have an obligation and noble duty to say no to France's dominance. Why should our brothers and sisters be placed under a foreign nation, La Republique? Why should our brother be placed under a foreign nation, La Republique? You know how many citizens... Let's watch a video here. Let's watch. We shall come to this. What is the dictator in celebrating his birthday? Why our people are languishing in the forest? Of course. How old is he? How old is he? He's 87 years old. He's 87 years old. Pobia of the neighboring country like Cameroon. Our citizens fighting for an equal opportunity, equal right, the right to exist as people, the right to equal distribution. We came to that what is so-called the union. We came there with equal status. We did not, in that so-called status, that lot of people would define who we are, but we are came there of equal status. And yet, our people are being locked up in that foreign nations as though they have control over our people. I am here to remind the world community and the injustice they have persuaded upon the world community that the people of Southern Cameroon will not stand for this injustice of world community. Let's look at what has happened in Southern Cameroon a few days ago. Let's look. These are our young generation. These are students of Southern Cameroon. They intentionally shot by the gendarmerie. The gendarmerie is a French force that is instituted in West Africa to provide security, to protect France interests. The gendarmerie is a terrorist organization that is being stayed in West Africa by the French authority. And that is the slaughtering our citizens. The gendarmerie is a branch, the National Gendarmerie Brigade is a French finance authority that is instituted in West Africa to help secure Africa for France. And that is why our citizens are being murdered because of them. Let's look. Look. Look at young children. It could have been my brother. It could have been my sister. It could have been my distant uncle, distant relative. But they were being shot by gendarmerie in Alateco, in Mancon. They are being shot in Alateco, in Mancon. The gendarmerie is controlled, managed solely by the French authority in West Africa to focus on the interests of France rather than the interests of indigenous Africa as a whole. Yet, you can see, it could have been your brother, it could have been your sister, it could have been your relative, it could have been your cousin. But we are related in one way or the other. But yet, their life has been cut short because we have the interest of France is the top priority over the interest of the indigenous Africa as a whole. What a brutal system. What a brutal system. You know that the so-called African organization, the OAU, the ambassador was recently removed from office because France asked the OAU Secretary General to remove someone that has nothing to do with France as in general, Europeans in general. And she was asked to be released from her office. She was asked to be released from her office because the interest of France is a top priority over the interest of Africa. What is wrong with Africa? What is wrong? There's something wrong somewhere. There is something absolutely wrong somewhere. Why would France ask the representative of Africa at the United Nations be released of its functions? Because she happened to speak against the truth. She spoke the reality. She spoke something that people often neglected. That because they want to just wear their suit and sit and appreciate clap. Yes, France, you're right. Yes, France, thank you, sir. Yes, France, you are the amazing. Yes, France, we trust you. Yes, France, we believe in you. Yes, France, you are doing amazing. Now, that's the reality that we are suffering. We do not need France, and we must stand up against injustice of France. We must stand against injustice of France. Fellow African, we cannot have this continue for a long period of time. We cannot allow this to continue for a long period of time. We need to rise and say no to France because we cannot take this for a long time. Our people, this is our citizens that have been murdered. They have been murdered. And yet we just fold our hand. We just need to be clapping our hand. Yes. On vous soutient, on vous apprécie. Yes, nous sommes les Français. Oui, vous l'avez bien dit. Yeah, nous apprécions votre travail que vous faites en Afrique. Apprécions what they are doing in Africa. They are destroying Africa. France is destroying Africa. France is destroying Africa. We must rise. We know how they do it. We know how they do it and we can do it. We don't need to rely on France as the architects. I give one clear example. During the economic crisis here in the United States, the United States did not ask the World Bank IMF for loan. The United States asked the Central Bank of the United States. And the Central Bank of the United States allocated $700 billion. Because of the financial crisis, the United States did not ask the IMF, the World Bank. The United States did not ask a foreign government. The United States did not ask any government. The United States asked its central bank, $700 billion, allocated that money in the central treasury. That money was used to finance other banks for increase their liquidity ratio. The banks used to increase their liquidity ratio, and that liquidity prompted the economic rebound of the United States. We all know how to do the right thing, but yet we don't want to follow the right thing. We want to rely on a foreign dominance, France. But I am here to remind Africa, please, we can do better. If our citizens are being died in the south of Spain, escaping, does that make a significant difference that we need to do something? Why must they leave Africa with the vast land that we have in Africa to escape to Europe, where they have a remarkably small land area? They have to die in the high sea because they're seeking for a better environment. And yet we have a vast land, but we can't do the right thing. We want to rely on foreign nations. Let's start by doing the right thing. Let's establish a higher institute of scientific research and promote research and development. Provide funding to those developments. Increase. In 3 years' time, we have the most brilliant citizens of Africa that are everywhere in the world. But if we allow them the opportunity, provide them the financial aspect, in future things will change. Despite the fact that we have a vast land of Africa that is incredible. But we don't want to do the right thing. We don't. We don't want to do the right thing. We have dictators that stay in power, just like France instituted dictatorship for their own self-glorification or their interest. That is why our brothers have been murdered. And we have to sit and clap. Yes, yes, yes. We have to sit and clap. Yes, let's clap. France is doing the best thing in Africa. What is disgusting? What is disgusting? What is absolutely disgusting? You see, all of us are fighting amongst us. Why should we be fighting? We are not enemy to ourselves. It's the French influence enemy. That's why we fight among ourselves and ignore the real thing. That of the economic opportunity that we can create. Let's take, for example, let me go back again to that United States analysis. A few years ago, President Obama, he came to power. The economy was collapsing. The housing market was in its knees. United States, President Obama bring out his intelligent economic analysts. He asked them that we need to do something now. $700 billion was reallocated to financial institutions to increase their liquidity ratio. And that provided an opportunity to finance the bad firms that had liquidity, that didn't have the liquidity. They declared them insolvent, were immediately either restructured. United States did not ask IMF. United States did not ask a foreign bank. They asked the Bank of the United States. So therefore, if we have the Bank of Africa, then we don't need to go to France and ask them for their financial sponsor. We can do the right thing. Why can't we? Because France indirectly installed their leadership in Africa, that they control us, manipulate us, and that we rely on consumer economic system rather than producer economic system. That is one thing I talk about them, that we graduate more past them. Because that's what we were trained to be. To graduate more past them than graduating more engineer. Someone say, oh, China just banned pastors. Yes, that is right. China graduates billions of engineers daily. While we graduate more pastors daily. Guess who's going to promote the economic prosperity? Someone just posted on my Facebook that China just created highest speed train that can compete with plane. Yes, that is true. China graduate more engineers while we graduate more pastors. I don't mean that to be installed those who happen to be pastors, but I am stating just the fact. We graduate more pastors than we graduate more engineers. If we establish Institute of Research and Technology, then we can change the course of Africa, that we no longer rely on foreign nations to decide what we should be doing. Fellow Africans, we need to arise. We need to provide economic transparency. We need to have a good judicial system that will be able to manage United function, because it's a country that rules by law. And if we institute a law system, we institute where a president don't have to be a president for life, then each president will come with a vision. And when the vision no longer succeed, another president will come with a vision. And that is why the leadership must consistently switch from one another. I can talk on behalf of President Obama. I can talk on behalf of President Bush. I can talk on behalf of Bill Clinton. I can talk on behalf of our current president. I can talk on behalf of them, because there is economic disparity that I will appreciate which one is doing the best. But we will have one single individual that stay in power for 30 years, for Christ's sake. What a disgrace! Africa, we need to change this mentality. Let's take, for example, Siseko Ayok is in jail. Yes. Does that mean that Ambaluna has to be stopped? No. Ambaluna has to move forward. That they have people in place they are capable to do further. And with that, land public, that what can you do? We tell them we can create another. We have available African, Southern Cameroonians available to take the leadership. We shouldn't be stuck and say, oh no, I am not stuck on one person. I am not. I believe that everyone has the capability to make a dynamic impact on the Southern Cameroon without concentrating on one single individual. So we need to have this mentality. We don't need to have that loyalty. Loyalty is within a specific time frame in which that person must have the power. and after which I didn't support that he should be in jail. La Republique has no legal authority to put him in jail. But we must understand that we must have a time frame in which leadership must stay in power. And we must move on. Fellow brothers and sisters, I want to take a moment to thank all of you for watching. This is Brother Daniel speaking from here from the great state of Texas. I wish you all a happy, wonderful day. God bless. Ambazonia, we are together. La Republique will crumble. La Republique will crumble. And we will not. La Republique will crumble and we will not. Guess what? I told La Republique several years ago, 2 years ago, that I let them watch what's going to happen. They thought I was joking. Let them see where they can face it. I heard five of those have been sent. Five of La Republique ministers have been sentenced in absentia, even though they are still ministers. They have been sentenced, their passport been taken away. They are not. They are just waiting. They are closely monitored. They are not monitored by the United States. They are monitored by the same regime that put him as a minister. 5 ministers have already been sentenced in absentia. They are not even aware that they are waiting their day to be taken to jail. Yes, 5 of La Republique ministers has already been sentenced. They are just there like figureheads, but they have never been told. But they are just waiting for a new government to reshuffle in La Republique. I told them to leave La Republique, and all those who are still persisting, stay in La Republique. Your own day is coming. We have told them to declare benevolent neutrality, but they are still persisting, lying in La Republique. Some of them, 5 ministers have been sentenced. They have not been told. Their passport has been taken away. But they are just there. They are waiting for the moment to be transferred, to be shipped to Condé. Let them wait there. Their days is coming. They are not waiting to reshuffle. Once the government is reshuffled, they will be immediately transferred to Condé. They are ready. They have already been sentenced. La Republique justice doesn't carry in the public place. In Samalima, justice takes place. In Samalima, that's where the trial took place. In Samalima, 5 ministers have been sentenced in absentia. Their close sentences is placed sealed in an envelope. They are waiting for new government reshuffle. Once the government reshuffle, they immediately be transferred to Condé. I just will repeat them so that they be aware that they just have a few days left. Once the government reshuffle is take place, they will be immediately transferred to Condé. Yes. Yes. 5 ministers. 5 ministers. 5 ministers have been sentenced in absentia. And those ministers, they were sentenced, some have at least 25 years or more in prison in La Republique. And those 5 ministers, I don't want to call names, they know themselves. They have been sentenced to, and their passport, their identical, their credential has already been taken away. So they don't wait in a new restructuring government. While La Republique restructuring, whatever the so-called restructuring, they will be immediately picked up. Their movement is strictly controlled. Their guard corps, those who watch like security, are no longer with them. They have special security that monitor them closely, 24 hours in their residential area. They cannot open mouth, they cannot open voice. They are just waiting for the day to be transported, to be shipped to Condé. As soon as the restructuring government began immediately, La Republique is planning those structures maybe either this year, before this year run out, or early January. Once they listen, pick up, those ministers will be immediately shipped to Condé. I know when I leave this message, they're going to be panicking. They know themselves. Yes. With their atrocity. Yes, they're ready. They already been sentenced in absentia. They don't need to carry to nowhere. They already been sentenced in absentia, even though they fulfill their role as a minister. They're just waiting for the restructuring. While the restructuring took place, they immediately be shipped straight to Condé without even waste of time. They are there, they're waiting. I told them, the third day they ignored the Southern Cameroon, say they have a land public. Unfortunately, they cannot return to Southern Cameroon because for my Christ, I think one of them in Southern Cameroon, we will gonna roast them like meat. That is the truth. Because they ignore the truth. They think they are in La Republique. They are in La Republique. They can fly their shoulders. I promise them. They are already been sentenced. Five of the ministers. 5. And some other top gendarme officials and whatever you call them, defense army or whatever you call themselves. Those things. Land public. They are already been sentenced in absentia. They are waiting for restructuring. You know that there's some general that have just been. Those general will replace those ones. They were going to be shipped to Congo. Those that were thinking that were doing good for the Southern Cameroon, that they're going to murder citizens of Southern Cameroon. They are coming. Their days is numbered. They are going to be traveling to Congo as soon as the restructuring takes place. But however, Southern Cameroon, stay tuned. We're going to move forward. We are not going to rely on the Republic because our sovereignty. We need to fund Southern Cameroon ambassador defense system. Keep strong. We need to fund them. They rely upon us, and we need to show them that we have all the relentless support. I want to thank all of you that are watching. I wish you all a happy, wonderful day. This is Fundon Daniel speaking live here from the great state of Texas. That is Texas.